6. Joining us now is former White House Communications Director Anthony Scaramucci. Great to have you here. We have a lot to talk about.
Good morning.
Let me just play for you two conflicting things that the president said. One was in May about a hurricane, and one was this weekend about this hurricane. So listen to how he categorized this.
I've just come from a stop at Tyndall Air Force Base where I saw the devastating effects of that Category 5 hurricane.
I'm not sure that I've ever even heard of a Category 5. I knew it existed, and I've seen some Category 4s. You don't even see them that much, but a Category 5 is something that I don't know that I've ever even heard the term, other than I know it's there.
How did he forget that a Category 5 exists over the past 3 months?
Well, I mean, I think what happens is he's on sort of replay mode, so it's almost like a season rerun for him. And so he has a few phrases that he uses repetitively that he thinks working. And so saying that he's never heard of a Category 5 hurricane and not remembering that he's heard of a Category 5 hurricane is emblematic of what's going on in terms of the mental decline. But I think the problem now...
Well, let me stop you right there about that, because I know that you're talking about his mental decline, but not a lot of people are talking about that. However, for Democrats, with Joe Biden, there's a lot of talk about whether people should be concerned about his mental acuity. So are you saying that what you hear there is mental decline, or is something else going on?
Well, I mean, if you look at a whole pattern of speech and you look at a whole deterioration of his syntax and the way he's talking, look, I'm not a psychiatrist, so I'm not going to clinically evaluate him, but if just as a person looking at it as a voter, you're saying, okay, the guy's obviously in mental decline. But what I find sad and troubling about the whole thing is that he's got a group of people around him that are supposedly loyal to him and like him, that they're not addressing it, they're not evaluating it. And so what's happening is CNN is showing a clip like that, which is incredibly embarrassing. But here's what I would say. If it was my dad, okay, or it was a family member and you were showing clips like that, there's a little bit of sadness to the whole thing. There's an element of sadness to the whole thing. And so for me, I'm looking at that. The guy's in obviously mental decline. He missed the fact that Alabama wasn't affected by the storm.
Right. So, so
now you've got a whole group of people that, like I said to you guys, it's like Trump Noble. He's in full-blown meltdown. And now you've got a group of people that have made a decision that they're going to cover this up as opposed to clean it up. Now,
well, I don't know if he's in full-blown meltdown. I don't know what your evidence of that is. The
full-blown meltdown?
Yeah.
What are you talking about? I mean, he's
the fact that he says he doesn't know a Category 5.
He's on a vicious rant and attack. He attacks his fellow citizens almost every day, repetitively on Twitter. He went after Deborah Messing, who's just a fellow citizen of his in the United States over the weekend. He sends out between 40 and 60 tweets in a 24-hour period of time.
There were 122 this weekend.
It was 122 this weekend. And so when you say that he's not in a full-blown meltdown, we all have different opinions of what a full-blown meltdown is. But I think, I've been around the situation now for 3 solid years. There are people critical of me saying, well, you should have noticed it 3 years ago. Okay, I'll accept that criticism. But it's way worse today than it was 3 years ago, and it's going to get way worse in about 6 months. So, again, the Republicans have a responsibility to the nation to get him evaluated, and they have a responsibility to the nation to tell the truth. Now, if they are all in camp with him, then they should speak out over the next coming months and roundly endorse him and say that he's doing everything great and he's totally fine. But you notice they're not doing that either.
Well, some are. But, I mean, what you're talking about...
Some are who?
In terms of his supporters in the Congress.
In the Congress?
Yeah.
Okay, I haven't really heard that many supporters in the Congress speaking out glowingly about how well he's doing. I mean, let's face it, he had a horrific summer. He's doing well.
What you're talking about in terms of Alabama, I just want to read it for people, because this was erroneous information put out by the President of the United States as a storm is approaching. In addition to Florida, South Carolina, North Carolina, Georgia, and Alabama will most likely be hit much harder than anticipated. And, I just don't know what voters are supposed to make of erroneous information like this.
Well, I mean, that could be a combination of things. Or that could be his comms team that was putting that out. He wasn't probably paying close enough attention to it. I mean, again, I'm not here to apologize for that tweet or even defend it, but I think what's even crazier about the whole thing is he can't ever admit that he's wrong. And so he's putting out a tweet after the fact saying, well, it's good to be prepared anyway, even though the hurricane's not near you. It's like telling Nebraska that the hurricane's coming, but be prepared for it. But this is the stuff. We're now in that debate where you guys are showing those clips. those clips, if you're a family member, they should be sad to you, honestly. And if they're not sad to you, then what is exactly going on? I mean, is the power that important, where you have to hold power that closely, despite the fact that you know that there's a dematerialization going on at the time that you're observing something like that?
You know, my has been made that you were only in the White House for a short time. However,
Right.
you have been around the team enough to know, I think, what happens behind the scenes during a crisis like this. So when the president cancels his trip to Poland, as he did about this hurricane, what's going on? Is he feeling compassion for the victims? Because it's hard to tell when we see him just golfing all weekend.
Well, I mean, listen, I mean, again, these are my personal opinions, my personal observation. He doesn't really feel a lot of compassion for anybody, actually. And so, you know, if you just look at what he was doing in El Paso, where he's holding the babies recently orphaned, he's got his thumb up in the air like it's a fundraiser out in the Hamptons. And so he's not really showing great compassion. He's out golfing. He complained about President Obama golfing incessantly. And so now he's doing the exact same thing, if not worse. I think he's golfed, you know, over 200 days. But I think that the real issue isn't just that. It's that the messaging from the presidency, and the reason why he's stuck at 40%, and I predict will go down into the low 30s, is that at the end of the day, it's about people. It's about people way more than it is about policy, Allison. And people are concerned. And when you look at the country right now and you say, okay, is this how we want things to go? At the end of the day, somebody that's sitting in that office has to have a little bit more compassion and a little bit more humanity. You point out the fact that I was only in the White House for a short period of time. That's fair. But I was on the campaign. I was on the presidential transition team. And even after getting fired from the White House, I wanted to stay loyal to the president's agenda, and I wanted to stay loyal to, by and large, a lot of the policies. But as you and I both know, two years of discussions about the situation, there's a lot of things that are going wrong. And so now you've gone past the tripwire of normalcy. And so even a Republican like me, who would like to support the president, you can't support this sort of stuff. And so the question is, when will normal, rational people start to come around to that? Because I get the loyalty conflict, and I get the anchoring
let me
to something that's so wrong.
Because the last time we spoke, you predicted that there would be other people from the administration who would come out and express their condemnation of the president or their displeasure. And then Jim Mattis came out and did that last week. Is that who you were referring to?
Well, I don't want to speak for General Mattis. And he's on his book tour right now, and obviously he's a decorated Marine, and so I think he was a little bit more subtle than the approach that I'm taking. But he's definitely in the camp where there's something wrong.
But are you saying that more people will come out?
I absolutely believe that. Yeah, I mean, there was no reason for people to come out in the month of August. Okay, but as we go, it's, we're after Labor Day now. School's starting. The news cycle is going to kick into the fall. I do believe that responsible Republicans that know the situation are going to have to speak out, because you got to save the party. I mean, you're not going to be able to sit there in 2024 and say, well, listen, I whistled past the graveyard of the Trump dereliction of duty, and I did absolutely nothing because I was afraid of a tweet. I was afraid he was going to attack one of my family members. I was afraid of his bombast and his bullying. And so how are you going to stand on that stage in 2024 if you didn't do something today in 2020?
And you've also talked about a primary challenger or a primary challenge. And are you referring to Joe Walsh, or are there other?
Well, I think there's a few. I mean, the deadline is November. I think there's a few others. Remember, states like New Hampshire have a proportionate delegate system. And so if you can get somebody in there, in New Hampshire, he's disaster in the polls. I mean, he's down 26% against a generic Democrat.
But you think somebody else will step forward?
I do. I think somebody else is going to step forward. I think it's going to cause some disruption. I think somebody that really loves the Republican Party and loves America actually needs to damage him going into the presidential race. If he makes it to the presidential race, I mean, it's not clear to me that he's going to make it. I still predict that poll numbers are going to go much lower, and I predict that, like Lyndon Johnson, he'll likely leave the race before he gets there.
Anthony Scaramucci, you make a lot of predictions that are really fascinating.
Okay, but did Mattis say more or less what I said?
And some of them come true.
Okay, so here's what's going to happen.
Quickly.
Okay, just quickly. He's going to continue to dissemble. He's going to amp up the bullying, and then